I am Natasha Reeves, 34 years old, and tonight I am standing on a stage at the Gramercy Theater in Manhattan, looking out at 400 faces illuminated by the soft amber glow of vintage Edison bulbs hanging from exposed brick walls. My debut novel, Fractured Light, has just been named one of NPR's best books of the year. There's a line of people stretching out the door and wrapping around the block, all clutching copies with my name embossed in gold foil on the cover, waiting for me to sign them. The moderator, a respected literary critic from The New Yorker, just asked me about my inspiration for writing a book about a woman who rebuilds her life after devastating betrayal. I smiled, took a slow sip of water from the glass on the table beside me, and said the truth I have been rehearsing for 7 years. I wrote it because I lived it. What I did not say, what I could not say into that microphone, was that the man who shattered me so completely that I had to write myself back into existence was standing in the back row of this theater right now, partially hidden behind a concrete support column, watching me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Remorse. But let me rewind 7 years, back to a moment when I was a completely different version of myself, back to the tiny studio apartment in Astoria, Queens, where the ceiling had a water stain shaped like a continent I could never quite identify, and where my entire life collapsed in the span of 11 minutes. It was a Thursday evening in late September. The air conditioning unit in the window was broken, so the apartment was sweltering, the kind of heat that made your clothes stick to your skin and your thoughts move through sludge. I was 27 years old, working as an editorial assistant at a mid-tier publishing house, making $32,000 a year before taxes, which in New York City meant I was essentially working for the privilege of being poor in an expensive zip code. I had spent the entire day reading unsolicited manuscript submissions, most of them unreadable, and my eyes ached from staring at my computer screen under fluorescent office lighting for 9 hours straight. But I was happy. I was deliriously, foolishly happy because I was pregnant. 3 months and 2 weeks along, carrying a secret I had only just confirmed that morning with a digital pregnancy test that had cost me $14 at the Duane Reade on the corner. The test had displayed the word pregnant in crisp black letters, and I had stared at it for a full 3 minutes in the bathroom stall at work, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face, before I tucked it into my purse and went back to my cubicle to finish copy editing a cookbook about fermented vegetables. Damien was supposed to come home at 6. That was the plan. I had bought ingredients to make pasta carbonara, his favorite, even though it required pancetta I could not really afford because I wanted the evening to be perfect when I told him. I had rehearsed the words a dozen times. I'm pregnant. We're going to be parents. I even bought a tiny pair of baby shoes from a thrift store in Park Slope, little white sneakers no bigger than my thumb, and placed them in a gift box wrapped in yellow tissue paper. But Damien did not come home at 6. He came home at 7:43, and he was not alone. He walked through the door with a woman I had never seen before, a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion editorial, all long limbs and expensive highlights, and a Celine handbag dangling from her forearm. She was wearing a white linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and her skin had that particular glow that comes from regular facials and 8 hours of sleep every night, luxuries I had not experienced in years. Damien looked at me standing in the kitchen, my hair tied back in a messy bun, wearing a faded NYU t-shirt with a tomato sauce stain on the hem, and his face did something I had never seen before. It twisted into an expression of embarrassment, like I was a problem he had forgotten to solve. Natasha, he said, his voice flat and rehearsed, like he was reading from a script he had memorized on the subway ride home. This is Genevieve. Her father owns the venture capital firm I have been consulting for. She and I have been seeing each other for the past 6 weeks. I am moving my things out tonight, and I will be staying at her place in Tribeca going forward. You can keep the apartment through the end of the lease, but after that, you will need to figure something else out. I stood there frozen, the wooden spoon I had been using to stir the pasta sauce still dripping marinara onto the linoleum floor, creating a small red puddle that looked disturbingly like blood. 6 weeks. He had been cheating on me for 6 weeks, and I had noticed nothing. I had been so consumed by work, by exhaustion, by the secret growing inside me, that I had missed every single red flag. The late nights he claimed were client dinners. The new cologne. The way he had stopped touching me, stopped kissing me goodnight, stopped asking about my day. Genevieve stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, looking around the apartment with the kind of disdain you reserve for a subway car that smells like urine. She did not introduce herself. She did not apologize. She just sighed, a long, theatrical exhale, and said to Damien, "Can we hurry this up? I have Pilates at 9. Damien walked past me into the bedroom and began pulling clothes out of the closet, shoving them into a leather duffel bag I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. I followed him, the yellow gift box with the baby's shoes clutched in my hands, my voice finally unlocking from my throat. "Damien," I said, and my voice sounded small and far away like it was coming from someone else's body. "I am pregnant." He stopped packing. For a moment, just a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw something human cross his face. But then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. He zipped the duffel bag closed, slung it over his shoulder, and looked at me with the kind of detachment you would use to discuss a parking ticket. "That is unfortunate timing," he said. "But Genevieve and I are building something real, something that has a future. She comes from the kind of family that opens doors. Her connections can take me places you never could. You are sweet, Natasha, and you work hard, but you are not what I need anymore. You are a placeholder, and I have found the real thing." He walked out of the bedroom, past me, past the tiny gift box I was still holding like a talisman. Genevieve followed him, her heels clicking on the floor. The door closed behind them. The lock clicked. And I was alone, 3 months pregnant, holding a pair of baby shoes that would never be worn by a child who would never know her father. If you have ever been abandoned at the exact moment you needed someone most, or if you have ever been told you are not enough by someone who was never worthy of you in the first place, hit like, so this story reaches more people who need to hear it. The first 3 months after Damien left were a study in survival logistics. I did not have the luxury of falling apart, even though my body wanted to shut down, even though there were mornings when I woke up and forgot for 3 blissful seconds that my life had imploded, only to have reality crash back in with the force of a freight train. I was pregnant, alone, and financially underwater. My salary barely covered rent, utilities, and food for one person. Adding a baby to that equation was mathematically impossible, but math does not care about impossibility when you are already living it. I picked up freelance copy editing work at night, the kind of soul-crushing projects that paid $12 an hour to fix grammar in corporate training manuals about workplace harassment prevention. The irony was not lost on me. I worked until 2 in the morning most nights, my laptop balanced on my growing belly, my eyes burning, my fingers cramping, earning an extra $600 a month that went directly into a savings account I labeled Baby Fund. By my 3rd trimester, that account had grown to $4,700. It was nowhere near enough, but it was something. It was proof that I was trying. My daughter Alina was born on a humid Tuesday in June at Elmhurst Hospital, a sprawling public facility in Queens that smelled like industrial disinfectant and exhaustion. I labored for 19 hours in a room with mint green walls and a window that overlooked a parking garage. My mother flew in from Ohio, bless her, and held my hand through every contraction, whispering prayers in Spanish that her own mother had taught her. When Alina finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and furious at being forced into the world, the nurse placed her on my chest and I looked down at her tiny, scrunched face and made a promise. I whispered it against her damp forehead while she rooted around for milk, while my mother cried quietly in the corner. "I will give you a life worth living. I will show you that we do not need anyone who does not see our value. We are enough, you and me. We are more than enough." But promises do not pay for diapers. Promises do not cover the cost of childcare, which in New York City runs about $2,000 a month for an infant. I could not afford daycare, so my mother stayed for 6 weeks, sleeping on the couch, waking up with me for the 3 a.m. feedings, holding Alina while I pumped milk at the kitchen table before stumbling off to work. When my mother finally had to return to Ohio because she had her own job, her own life, I was left to figure out a childcare solution that would not bankrupt me. I found a woman named Rosa who ran an informal daycare out of her apartment 2 blocks away. She charged $800 a month, which was still more than I could comfortably afford, but it was the best option available. Rosa was kind. She loved children. She sang to Alina in Spanish and sent me photos throughout the day. But every morning when I dropped Alina off, when I handed my 4-month-old daughter to a woman I barely knew and walked away to go sit in a cubicle for 9 hours, a piece of my heart cracked a little more. I was exhausted in a way that goes beyond physical tiredness. It was a bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion, the kind that makes you forget words mid-sentence and puts your keys in the refrigerator. I was running on 4 hours of sleep a night, subsisting on coffee and granola bars, wearing the same 3 outfits to work on rotation because I did not have time or money for anything else. My hair started falling out in clumps from the stress. I developed a twitch in my left eye that would not go away. But I kept moving, kept working, kept showing up, because stopping was not an option. Stopping meant losing everything. It was during one of those nights, sitting at my kitchen table at 1 a.m. with Alina asleep in her crib and a manuscript open on my laptop, that something inside me shifted. I was copy editing a memoir written by a CEO about his journey from poverty to wealth, and the prose was so self-congratulatory, so tone-deaf, so completely divorced from the reality of what actual poverty feels like, that I found myself furiously writing notes in the margins. This is not how it works. This is not what survival looks like. You did not pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You stepped on the backs of people who could not fight back. And then I stopped typing. I stared at those angry notes and realized I was not just editing anymore. I was writing. I was telling a story, my story, the story of what it actually costs to survive when the world tells you that you are disposable. I opened a new document. I titled it Fractured Light, a name that came to me fully formed, like it had been waiting in my subconscious for permission to exist. And I started writing. I wrote about a woman named Morgan who gets pregnant and abandoned by her ambitious boyfriend who trades her in for a woman with better connections. I wrote about the shame of being left, the grinding poverty of single motherhood, the way society punishes women for the crimes committed against them. But I also wrote about resilience, about the quiet, unglamorous work of rebuilding, about the way love for a child can be both an anchor and a lifeline. I wrote in stolen moments, 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, during Alina's naps and after her bedtime and on my lunch breaks at work. The manuscript grew slowly, painfully, like a plant forcing its way through concrete. It took me 2 years to finish the first draft. Comment rise if you believe that your lowest moment can become your greatest transformation. I sent the manuscript to 47 literary agents. I received 46 rejections. The letters were polite but devastating. Not quite right for our list. We do not see a clear market for this. The voice feels too raw. That last one almost made me delete the entire manuscript. Too raw, as if pain was supposed to be polished and palatable before it was allowed to exist on a bookshelf. But the 47th agent, a woman named Miriam Chen who ran a small agency out of Brooklyn, sent me a different kind of email. She said, "This manuscript made me cry on the subway. I want to represent you. Let's find this book a home." It took Miriam another 8 months to sell the book. We went on submission to 23 publishers. 22 passed. The 23rd, a mid-sized independent press called Crescent Moon Books, offered me a contract and a $15,000 advance. $15,000. It was not life-changing money, but it was validation. It was proof that my story, my pain, my survival, mattered to someone other than me. The book was published 18 months later on a Tuesday in October, the kind of crisp autumn day when the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. Crescent Moon Books did not have a large marketing budget, so the launch was modest. A reading at a small independent bookstore in Park Slope called the Lit Bar, where 37 people showed up, most of them friends and acquaintances who came out of obligation rather than genuine interest. But something unexpected happened that night. After I finished reading the 3rd chapter, the one where Morgan sits in a hospital room alone holding her newborn daughter and makes a promise she does not know if she can keep, a woman in the back row stood up. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks, and she said, "This is my story. You wrote my story." I did not know anyone else understood. Other women started nodding, wiping their eyes, and suddenly the room was not a bookstore anymore. It was a church. It was a confession booth. It was a gathering of survivors who had been waiting for permission to be seen. The book started moving, not in a viral explosion, but in a slow, steady burn, the kind of success that happens when readers hand copy to their friends and say you have to read this. Book clubs started selecting it. Therapists began recommending it to clients. The hashtag Fractured Lightbook started appearing on Book Talk and Instagram, with women posting videos of themselves crying while holding my book, talking about their own experiences of abandonment and survival. Within 6 months, Fractured Light had sold 60,000 copies. A major publisher, Apex House, approached Crescent Moon about acquiring the rights for a re-release with national distribution. The deal was finalized for $250,000, and suddenly I was not just a single mother scraping by anymore. I was an author with a platform, with a voice, with options. Type yes if you want to see what happened when he finally realized what he lost. The re-release came with a proper book tour, 23 cities in 30 days, and the tour concluded with a marquee event at the Gramercy Theater in Manhattan, a venue usually reserved for musicians and Broadway previews. It was the kind of event that gets covered by Publishers Weekly and the New York Times, the kind of event where literary agents and film producers circle like sharks looking for the next big acquisition. I was scheduled to do a conversation with the critic from The New Yorker, followed by a Q&A with the audience, followed by a signing. The theater sold out in 48 hours. 400 tickets gone. There was a wait list of 200 more people hoping for cancellations. My publicist called me 3 days before the event, her voice vibrating with excitement. "Natasha," she said, "this is it. This is your moment. You have arrived." I stood backstage that evening, looking at myself in the mirror of the dressing room, barely recognizing the woman staring back. I was wearing a black silk jumpsuit I had purchased at a boutique in Soho, the kind of place I used to walk past and never dream of entering. My hair, which had been falling out from stress 3 years ago, was now professionally styled in loose waves. I was wearing makeup done by an actual makeup artist, not the drugstore concealer I usually smeared on in the bathroom mirror while Alina ate breakfast. I looked successful. I looked legitimate. I looked like someone who belonged on a stage in front of 400 people. But underneath the silk and the makeup, I was still that woman standing in a studio apartment in Queens, holding baby shoes in a yellow box, watching the door close on her entire future. The conversation went well. The critic asked thoughtful questions about the craft of memoir as fiction, about the ethics of writing from trauma, about the responsibility of storytelling. I answered with the kind of practiced eloquence that comes from doing 50 interviews in 2 months. The audience laughed when I made jokes. They leaned forward when I talked about the hard parts. And then, during the Q&A, a woman in the third row raised her hand and asked, "Do you ever regret the person who hurt you? Do you ever wish you could show them what they lost?" I paused, my hand tightening around the microphone. Before I could answer, I saw him. Damien was standing in the back row, partially obscured by a concrete support column, but unmistakably him. He had aged in the 7 years since I last saw him. His hairline had receded. There were deep lines around his mouth. He was wearing an expensive suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, but it hung on him in a way that suggested weight loss, stress, something unraveling beneath the surface. And he was alone. No Genevieve, no entourage, just him watching me with an expression that looked like mourning. I took a breath, and I answered the question, my eyes locked on his. I said, "Regret is a poison you drink hoping the other person will die. I do not regret him. I do not even think about him most days. What I regret is the time I wasted believing his narrative about my worth. But that regret taught me to write my own story instead. So no, I do not wish I could show him what he lost. I already know what he lost. He has to live with that, not me." The audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that shook the rafters, but I was not looking at them anymore. I was watching Damien, watching the way his face crumpled, watching him turn and walk toward the exit, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying a weight he could no longer bear. He left before the signing. He did not wait in line. He did not try to speak to me, and honestly, I am grateful for that. Because if he had approached me, if he had tried to apologize or explain or ask about Alina, I do not know what I would have done. I like to think I would have been gracious, dignified, the bigger person. But the truth is, I might have told him exactly what his absence cost us, might have shown him photos of the daughter he has never met, might have asked him if Genevieve's connections were worth the family he threw away. But he did not give me that choice. He left again, and this time I watched him go with something close to relief. If this moment gave you chills, Comment Reborn below and share this video so others understand that your value is not determined by people who could not see it. After the signing, after I had signed 362 books and my hand was cramping and my face hurt from smiling, my publicist pulled me aside. "Natasha," she said, holding up her phone with the screen glowing. "Netflix wants to option the book for a limited series. They are sending over an offer tomorrow." I stared at her, the words not quite computing. A limited series. My story, Alina's story, our survival, was going to be seen by millions of people. The girl who was told she was not enough, who was abandoned while pregnant, who rebuilt her life word by painful word, was going to have her truth broadcast into living rooms across the world. I thought about Damien watching that series someday, seeing a version of himself immortalized as the villain, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a quiet, settled peace. He was a footnote now, a catalyst, a necessary antagonist in a story that was never really about him. It was about me. It was about Alina. It was about every woman who has ever been discarded and decided to build something beautiful from the wreckage. I went home that night to my apartment in Brooklyn, a 2-bedroom place with hardwood floors and a window that gets morning light, the kind of place I could finally afford because of the book. Alina was asleep when I got there, my mother watching her for the evening, and I stood in the doorway of her room, watching her breathe, her small chest rising and falling in the glow of her nightlight. She is 7 now, fierce and funny and completely unaware that her existence saved my life. Tomorrow I will take her to school and go to a meeting with producers and come home to make dinner and help with homework and live the beautifully ordinary life I fought so hard to build. And Damien, wherever he is, whatever he is doing, will not be part of it. He made his choice 7 years ago. I made mine every single day since. If you have ever rebuilt your life from absolute zero and proven that you are more than the worst thing someone said about you, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the stories of people who refuse to stay broken, and comment below telling me what promise you made to yourself that changed everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me. And remember, the person who underestimated you has to live with that mistake forever. You just get to live.